In the girls' final, Berkeley from Wollongong in the green and yellow took on Kingscliff from the north of the state. In a close match played in wet and cold conditions, Kingscliff ran out winners 2-1. Best for the northern side were centre Laurel Morrissey and Angela Hagan. They both scored goals to give Kingscliff the New South Wales Girls Open Championship for 1987. Best for Berkeley was their captain, Kim de Cluet. She scored her side's only goal. In the boys, Parks in the white took on defending champions Oxley High from Tamworth. Parks looked the more determined side and seemed to handle the conditions better. For Parks, Scott Cowell scored 2 goals, with his CHS under-16 representative teammate Michael Butler scoring another to take Parks to a 3-0 win over the Northerners. Organisers say this year's tournament has proved to be a great success despite the wet weather and shows the high standard of hockey being played throughout the state's schools. By the time firemen arrived at the park south of Swansea, residents had rescued the woman and a man. It's believed fire broke out in this caravan annex after a cigarette butt ignited bedclothes. Nord's Wharf Bushfire Brigade quickly contained the blaze, while ambulance officers attended to the burnt couple. The woman received first and second degree burns to 80% of her body and was transported to the Royal by the Newcastle Rescue helicopter. The man, who received burns to his arms trying to pull his wife from the flames, was taken to the Royal by road ambulance.
The striking members of the Health and Research Employees Association met at midday today and decided to continue their strike until after the outcome of the Conciliation Commission hearing in Sydney this afternoon. The 200 workers also voted to maintain emergency staffing in the laundry, the central sterilising unit, the operating theatres and the blood delivery. In all, some 22 non-nursing staff will remain at work until the meeting tomorrow morning at 7. In the meantime, the hospital says the volunteers are coping in the kitchen, but there is no elective surgery and the garbage is piling up. This afternoon, Commissioner McArdle recommended that the strikers return to work tomorrow. He also told the union that it should accept an offer from the hospital of a position for the permanent casual worker at the centre of the dispute. The hospital says the offer was made before the strike and it was for the same position that was gained by the contract worker from William Lyon Hospital.
The issue of child sexual assault was once hidden in the closet, but recent moves by the government, including a massive advertising campaign, have flung the doors wide open. Statistics show that reported cases of child sexual assault are on the increase. In 1980, 45 cases were reported. In 1986, that figure had dramatically jumped to 3,000. At City Hall last night, Lord Mayor of Newcastle John McNaughton called a special meeting for concerned citizens and groups. The guest panel included Terry Madden from Youth and Community Services, Detective Senior Constable Glenn Crompton from the Juvenile Services Bureau and Regional Paediatrician with the Child Development Unit Jeff Hardacre. Politicians Virginia Chadwick and Don Bowman were also on hand to answer questions. According to organiser Margaret Parker, the existing laws would be adequate if they were enforced properly. She says too many offenders are getting off lightly because of scapegoats in the judicial system, and urgent changes are needed.
One of the main changes is that we need to look at people who commit offences against children should have all their rights of parole, probation and remission revoked, so they are actually serving the amount of time that they're sentenced to.
In NBN News tonight at 6, the last commercial steam train line in Australia will shut down when Coal and Allied cuts production at its Stockrington No. 2 mine near Minmai. The reduced output will now be taken by road, meaning the old Hexham locos will be put to bed. You'll have until the end of September to see the relics at work. For all the news,
join us tonight
at 6.
Hello, I'm Janelle Provost. 135 workers at Bond Brewing finished up today, 10 days earlier than the company said it was going to close the plant. Despite calls from business and political leaders, Bond Brewing has refused to answer any questions about the closure of this efficient plant.
For all the news,
join us tonight
at 6.
These are the types of images the judges will be looking for. They want you to photograph any scene or person in the Hunter Valley. This theme of involving the entire valley in Newcastle's Matara Festival is carried through, with the entries being displayed in each of the Greater Newcastle Building Society's 26 branches. One of the judges, General Manager of the Greater, Bill Prince, says the branches will also have a say in the selection of the best photos.
And they will sift through the photographs they receive on a weekly basis and select what they consider about the best 50% of those on a weekly basis and send them down to Newcastle. Mr. Bert Lovett and I will then go through those photographs that come down, and from that we hope to find the right type of finalists.
So for all you shutterbugs who enjoy a challenge, you'd better start clicking, because you only have until September 25th to get your entries in at any Greater Newcastle Building Society branch.
Conditions at Cessnock Oval today were soft underfoot after 3 soccer matches yesterday pretty well chopped up the ground. Right from the start, both sides meant business. Lakes put the first points on the board with a penalty goal in the 4th minute by captain Peter Walsh. It was almost 30 minutes into the game when the first try was scored. Lakes lock Michael McKinnon scored a pretty easy try, and Lakes were leading 6-0. Just as Lakes looked as though they were getting on top, South winger Ashley Gordon made a break, flicked a pass inside to Steve Robinson, who scored what was to be the minor premier's only try. Just 2 minutes from half-time, Lakes half Steve Walters puts on a dance to step through South and score. The try was converted and Lakes went to the break, leading 12-4. Only points in the second half was a penalty goal to Lakes' Peter Walsh. South goal-kicking maestro Paul Waite had a shocker with the boot, kicking none from 4. In next week's preliminary finals at Carl Oval, in the first grade, South play Cessnock. In the reserves, Lakes will meet Maitland, and in the third grade, South play Lakes.
In the news at 6 o'clock, 3 RAAF Williamtown cyclists set out to ride to Adelaide to raise money for cancer. They and their 12-man support team hope to raise $50,000 for cancer research along the way. The team aims to be in Adelaide in under 2 weeks, rain, hail or shine.
For all the news,
join us tonight
at 6. As part of an economy drive, the MSB, with the consent of the Industrial Commission, introduced 5-day rostering at the beginning of August, intending to have any necessary weekend work done as overtime. The MSB Officers Association, which covers the foreman concerned, says it's not prepared to do excessive overtime just to suit the convenience of the MSB.
The board says it's not prepared to have the foreman just pick the eyes out of the best overtime. Last week, the board asked foremen to work Saturday, but insufficient were prepared to make operations worthwhile. So all 6 possible shifts on the weekend were cancelled. 5 ships were due to arrive in that time, but delays meant most of them could not take up a berth until today. Further talks are planned between the MSB and the Officers Association to try to iron out their differences. Meanwhile, the union says no bans are in force and there has been no strike. The wheat terminal continues to be idle, with the dispute between the Grain Handling Authority and the Public Service Association and the AWU due to go before the Industrial Commission in the morning. Workers were stood down when the unions concerned would not accept changes to facilitate continuous operation. Employees are continuing to maintain the complex without pay. However, a claim for wages to cover those hours will be made to Industrial Commissioner Sweeney tomorrow. The Grain Authority says nearly 4 hours are lost out of each 14-hour day due to downtime for smoko, meal and between-shift breaks. 3 months of negotiations were unsuccessful and the authority has now decided to force the issue of staggered breaks. Workers at the Sydney grain terminal have already accepted the new scheme. Assistant Commissioner Ross Nixon will be in charge of one of the 4 new police regions in the state, responsible for an area from the Sydney Harbour Bridge to Tweed Heads. Today, he outlined the new strategy for policing in a society which is relying more and more for its security on locks and guns, commercial patrols, and even just staying at home. Assistant Commissioner Nixon said the police force is beleaguered and alienated by the public, and the new consultation will help eliminate this.
Local police will invite prominent citizens and reputable citizens to take part in committees about once a month to get feedback of what's happening in their community, and then we can base our strategies and policies on what the citizens tell us.
Well, what sort of people will you be looking for and how will it work?
Well, we'll be looking at school teachers, bank managers, people from Rotary clubs and other organisations, and particularly those with a high ethical background.
Right, now crime is on the increase though, isn't it?
Let there be no doubt that crime is still increasing in Australia.
And the types of crime are becoming more violent.
They are, although we've always had violent crimes, but the violent crimes of today are given a very high profile.
So should we not worry with the way we're being policed?
I think you should, and the point that I've tried to make right through is that the police themselves are worried about the service that they are providing to the people who they serve. And we see that it's up to us to be able to improve the service to the public.
The Bond Company closed the brewery at Cardiff last week, 10 days before it had planned to, leaving 135 employees out of work. The majority belong to the Liquor Trades Union, while about 40 are maintenance workers, members of the FIA, the FEDFA and the Metal Workers Union. Although at first vowing to fight the closure, all of the employees eventually accepted redundancy packages, after the company agreed to first pay a $2,000 relocation allowance. The LTU accepted the company offer first, and the maintenance workers say this severely weakened their stand. FIA member Ron Gleeson is angry because he says the LTU organisers didn't stand up for their union.
The LTU executive are going out of their way to cooperate with the Bond Corporation in an effort to gain one union control of the whole brewery.
Well, these are fairly serious allegations. Are you alone in thinking this?
No, I think every member of our maintenance unions think the same way, and I believe possibly a lot of LTU members are starting to think that way also now.
LTU State President John Morris, who negotiated the settlement, this afternoon denied the claims. He said at all times he was following the wishes of his members and had in fact initially recommended they fight. Bond Corporation too denied the allegations. The company also said the proposals of the Hunter Development Board to run the plant or buy it from Bond were not being considered and it was still to be mothballed. Chairman of the Hunter Development Board, Alex Young, nevertheless said the board would be continuing a study into the feasibility of a new brewery in the Hunter. Mr Young said he hopes to hold talks with the Premier's Department on the matter next week.
Having rejected 2 union plans to help the coal industry, Coal Association representatives gathered for judgment on their own proposal. But after an hour of negotiations, the unions emerged unimpressed.
The major thrust actually was towards deregulation and full flexibility, and that's just not something we can consider under the current circumstances in the industry.
The parties will meet again next week, but neither is hopeful.
One should never give up, and we won't be giving up.
There were many familiar faces at last night's 98th annual general meeting of the Newcastle District Cricket Association. Local Australian representatives Rick McCosker and Gary Gilmore took their places, as did Lyle Gardner from the New South Wales Cricket Board and Brian Hughes, a state selector with the Country Cricket Association. The big announcement was the sponsorship for the upcoming season, and Boss Brothers Carpets from Newcastle West have placed its support behind the first grade premiership with $8,000. The sponsorship money will be distributed to each of the 12 clubs in the Newcastle district. Last night, President Tom Lockhart was re-elected into his 21st term, Secretary Dennis Broad to his 9th term, and Treasurer Neil Gibson beginning his 8th term of office. Nominations for district selectors were received and will be decided at the upcoming election. The cricket season will officially get underway over the October long weekend, warming up for the Sheffield Shield match at No. 1 Sports Ground between New South Wales and Queensland late November. Police say the driver lost control of the vehicle when the wheels locked and the semi skidded around the bend before overturning near the Kooragang coal loader. The semi had just left Eastern Nitrogen carrying a full load of nitropyl or ammonium nitrate used as a commercial fertiliser, but when mixed with any petroleum-based liquid such as diesel is highly explosive, and that's where emergency squads were taking no chances. At first it was believed that some of the spilt diesel had mixed with the nitropyl and was washing into a nearby drain. Police kept all onlookers at bay. But after a closer inspection, the all clear was finally given. The truck cab was lifted and carried away, while the remainder of the 24 tonnes of nitropyl was unloaded. The driver, en route to a northern Queensland mine, escaped uninjured.
We place nylon filament under the strings. It's fish line actually, and we then are able to draw that under the strings of the piano to produce a sustained tone. And we put color-coded markings inside the piano so that we know which notes to pick up and which notes to play when. Because inside the piano, every note looks like every other note.
And all of the music is on manuscript?
Yes, it's all written on manuscript and all thoroughly composed. There's no improvisation in this music, and we memorize the scores so that we know, we hope, what to play when.
It's a music with a style of its own.
I think of the bowed piano as, in some ways, a kind of orchestral sound because there are many possibilities. There are many textures that I can get out of it simultaneously. So I feel I'm treating it like an orchestra.
Director and composer Stephen Scott says rehearsing the choreography of the bowed piano is just as important as the music. As part of their month-long tour, the Colorado College New Music Ensemble will perform at the Sydney Opera House this Sunday.
Newcastle College of Advanced Education is just one of many tertiary institutions now running courses in computing. Already 11 of their 22 students who will graduate this year have had job offers. The offers came from the Commonwealth Public Service, which takes many computer graduates from across the country. Each year about 3,000 students graduate from computer studies courses nationally, but the industry needs about 8,000. Bill Galvin, head of the Department of Mathematics and Computer Studies at the CAE, is confident demand will keep on growing.
It has to go up, yes. I mean, it'll be a different world in 10 years' time, quite a different world. And I think young people are going to be living in that world, and we need young people to come into the industry and to take advantage of what's there and to provide a service to the community.
57 full-time students are now enrolled in the CAE computing course. The college says they hope to expand this enrolment next year.
I think students for the higher school certificate, for example, ought to consider seriously the proposition that in this industry, with 2 years training, 2 years good training, they can demand quite good salaries and can get a job that I think will be secure and interesting for the rest of their lives.